we're going to dive into what's going on with SushiSwap. We alluded to it at the start of this show, but there is a lot of drama happening there. So the current CTO, Joseph Delong, has threatened to quit unless the current team gets more support. If you dive into his giant Twitter thread, he kind of dives into the details. He says there's a lot of defamation going on there. There's a lot of misrepresentation of how things are happening. I mean, SushiSwap has always been mired in a bit of controversy. It started out literally as like a vampire mining tool. They wanted to suck all of the liquidity out of Uniswap. It was basically just a fork of Uniswap. And then after it got all of the liquidity, everyone was like, oh my God, there's a flippening and then a flip back. And then they're like, what's happening with this new protocol? You had the head of it, Chef Nomi, this anonymous figure, say, all right, well, I'm going to run off with all the money now. And everyone's like, what? And so you had like $14 million like disappear. And then you had him, like everyone hating on him. So he's like, all right, here's the money back, but I don't want control of this anymore. And, you know, I don't even want a reward. Like, I don't want anything. Here, Sam Bankman-Fried, you take everything. So then Sam Bankman-Fried like kind of manages the split key scenario where they're managing all of the treasury reserves so it can go to developers. And there's someone else called OX Mackey comes in and he's running things. He announced his departure a year later. It's a very controversial. So I want to dive into the details of what's going on with this current story here. You have DeLong basically, I mean, what he outlines seems like such a pattern in the crypto space. I've seen so many examples where you have people freely giving their time. Like, first of all, a lot of people literally freely giving their time to these crypto projects who are just donating their time. And then the community comes in and just hates on them and just epically like bullies them. And it happens all the time. In this case, DeLong was getting a salary, but as he mentions in his Twitter thread, he had to take a giant pay cut to when he left Dapper Labs to come in and take the reins at SushiSwap here. And he just says, listen, I'm exhausted. You guys are just nonstop bullying. We're trying to launch products. All you're doing is just like, it's amazing what kind of a culture emerges when you have all of these anonymous keyboard warriors out there feeling so brave, hating on the people who are trying to, you know, build projects. So basically his takeaway is, I'm going to ship Trident, and if you don't give me the autonomy to continue operations, the capability to form leadership and increase compensation across the board, I will leave. Because he just says it's not worth it. These projects are exciting. They want to build the decentralized future, but it's just so unpleasant to constantly be hated on by the community when you're just trying to do your job. So it's a very interesting situation. In a lot of the responses, like he says, he'll peacefully go, you know, you guys can go and find someone else to bully. All these people in the comments, you had so many haters being like, yeah, I've lost faith in you. You should leave. And he's like, okay, I will. It sucks to work here. That's literally what the thread's about, guys. So I kind of wanted to dig into this and also through the lens of this decentralization versus centralization. If you look at what he's saying, you know, he wants autonomy to continue operations. He wants the capability to form leadership. Like all of these words, I'm sure a lot of people in the decentralized words are like, oh my God, this is not the decentralized thing we aspired to. But there's a trade-off there. So Will, walk me through like what that trade-off is and what we're kind of seeing in the DeFi world through these projects and stuff.
Totally, yeah. Just to take like a 30-second step back, SushiSwap is a project like Uniswap that you said like launched in 2020, kind of had this famous backstory, a lot of bitter infighting between multiple key players in the crypto ecosystem. And it's developed into its own project over the last year, 2 years or so. But it doesn't mean that a lot of this controversy has left the platform at all. Joseph Delong came in as a CTO. He was a big hire for the SushiSwap community because of his past experience working on ETH2 development clients, a lot of just different projects around the space. And they brought him in to kind of formalize and professionalize SushiSwap. Before that, it was just kind of this ragtag joke almost, where it's like SushiSwap versus Uniswap, this token versus that token, this community versus this community. And Joseph came in, or DeLong came in to kind of fix that up. And they've had nothing but issues, it looked like, since that's happened. Not to his fault, but just because this community can be a little rabid at times, it seems. He's asking for more compensation, and he's asking for more leadership and more professionalization across the board. He said in that tweet that he wanted SushiSwap to be run more like Uniswap is run, where there is like the protocol is launched, there's a governance token, and then there's also Uniswap Labs, which kind of leads development for new iterations of Uniswap, like we saw with Uniswap v3. So he's asking for a very similar model that's already tried, tested, and true and is out there. The pushback, of course, is people saying, do you really deserve this compensation? Have the projects that you've shipped or the products you've shipped really been that good? And of course, a lot of these people in the community are going to ask and be very skeptical about how money should be spent, because it does come from a treasury. And also, if you spend money from a treasury and it's denominated in a token of that project itself, then everyone takes a haircut when someone sells. So there's even more kind of pressure on the developer community to get this right. I think we're not seeing the end of this. I think this is only going to keep going. And just like you said, Naomi, this is about centralization versus decentralization. If SushiSwap professionalizes more, it becomes more centralized and it can become more beholden to gatekeepers like the SEC or elsewhere. If it keeps going, though, in this decentralized fashion where there's not much leadership, well, it might fade into irrelevancy because there's not anyone calling the shots. Zach, I'll give it to you for final thoughts as we kind of close up.
So I missed all this drama this weekend, but I think you're right to look at this, right? So decentralization exists on a spectrum, and some things about decentralization are really great, and some things really, really suck. And I think what we're seeing here is an articulation of the things that suck. And so for that to, spill out into the open, I think is good for the space to reckon with what it looks like to run a project efficiently while still holding the ethos of decentralization near and dear. So it's interesting to see like these conversations take place with nuance, even if they can be ugly and toxic and scary at times for the people involved. But I'm going to be watching this one closely to see what comes of it, right? If there's going to be sort of a new standard for how to run a decentralized finance project that comes out of these conversations, I'm not necessarily hopeful or optimistic that that will occur, but I think it could occur. And I think that would be really interesting for the space to sort of grapple with across the board outside of just Sushi land. So that to me is interesting. And this one will probably stay interesting for the foreseeable future.